The courtroom went silent. All eyes were fixed on Kody Brown. The words had barely resounded when the gravity of the moment descended upon each and every one who was there. It wasn't merely a courtroom, it was a war zone of feelings, secrets, and ancient grudges. The air itself was heavy, weighing down upon the family, and upon anyone who would venture in. Kody Brown sat at the defense table, attempting to look serene, but the faint quiver in his fingers gave away the tempest brewing within him. His entire body was tense, as if ready to take a punch from an invisible tsunami. Through the room, Robyn was a force. She walked deliberately to the witness stand, each step slow, purposeful, as if she knew there were eyes tracking her every move. It was no mere walk. It was a declaration. Each step reverberated through the vast courtroom, so that it seemed time itself had been slowed. The highly polished wooden floor seemed to mirror her body, but it couldn't reduce the sense of resolve emanating from her. Her skin was white, bordering on ghostly under the glare of the overhead lights, but her eyes were keen and piercing, a glimpse into a soul tempered by betrayal, heartbreak, and strength. This was not the Robyn others had observed on TV, laughing, smiling, or meekly watching the family turmoil. This was a woman with an agenda, holding years of hurt and reality in her hands, and the folder she gripped, daringly marked evidence, contained so much more than ink and paper. It was a symbol of each of the promises shattered, each of the secrets guarded, and each of the seconds Kody had let the people who believed in him the most down. The judge, a stern figure of experience, leaned forward ever so slightly, aware of the seriousness of what was to transpire. His gaze flickered momentarily toward Kody, then Robyn, as if invisible acquiescence to the charged atmosphere present in the room. This was not going to be an ordinary day in court. Every sentence uttered, every glance shared, could unravel decades of familial history and personal pain. Mary, Janelle, and Christine were seated in the audience, each with a different mask of emotion. Mary's lips were pressed tightly together, her eyes glistening as she fought to suppress tears. She had seen this coming, but it didn't make it any easier. Janelle's hands were clenched in her lap, knuckles white, a mixture of anticipation and simmering anger burning behind her calm exterior. Christine, however, was apparently paralyzed, her thoughts flying through all recollection, all dealings with Kody and Robyn, speculating about the next event. None of them uttered a word, not a breath, not a gasp, but the unspoken tension between them was so close it made the already charged air almost tangible. The gallery, crowded with curious bystanders, friends and journalists, seemed to hold its breath. Cameras waited, pens poised to write out each word, but even they couldn't hope to record the raw tension in the air. Each rustle of dress, each scuffle of papers, each subtle crunch of shoes on the ground heightened the sense that something historic was on the verge of occurring. The walls themselves appeared to be leaning forward, eager to hear the secrets that were about to be spilled. As Robyn approached the witness stand, she hesitated for a moment, setting the bulky folder on the smooth wood before her. The thud of the folder striking the stand was unamplified, ringing out clearly, like a judge's gavel, a symbolic announcement that silence was at an end. She repositioned the microphone, her hand sweeping over the rim of the folder, anchoring herself in the reality she was about to unveil. Kody's eyes were on her, but he wasn't focusing on the folder, he was focusing on Robyn herself, the woman he'd shared so many intimate moments with, now become an unbending instrument of judgment. His mouth opened ever so slightly, as if he was going to say something, but nothing came out. Fear, regret, and shock crossed his features. For the first time, it felt like the full impact of his decisions was bearing down on him. Robyn breathed in deeply, the air filling her chest, calming herself. She knew that once she started, there would be no retreat. Everything she said would have the power of truth behind it, revealing the fissures in a carefully built veneer. She glanced briefly at the judge, then at Kody, then at the crowd. There was no spite in her eyes, only a quiet, unshakable resolve, a determination to finally be heard, to finally expose the truth. The courtroom seemed to have diminished its space, walls closing in expectantly. Even the air weighed down, each breath a reminder of how momentous the occasion was. Every individual in that room, be they family or stranger, could feel the voltage, the knowing that something monumental, life-changing, and totally inevitable was set to happen. Robyn's voice shook a little as she finally said something, shattering the stifling silence. I trusted him. I believed in him, and he destroyed my family. The words reverberated through the courtroom. For a moment it seemed like the universe itself paused to absorb them. Kody's face went pale, his hands frozen over the table. The audience leaned forward, captivated, unable to tear their eyes away. Mary's chest tightened, Janelle's lips pressed even harder, and Christine's gaze sharpened, every memory of betrayal and tension now crystal clear in her mind. It was not only what Robyn had said, it was the way in which she said it, the raw emotion, the contained anger, the quiet dignity. It all combined to create an instant so profound that even a passing observer could sense the vibrations of a family's broken trust. With each whisper, each held-back gasp, each subtle movement, the drama was exaggerated. The file on the table appeared nearly symbolic at this point, a tangible embodiment of decades of concealed truths. Robyn's hand was atop it, firm as if deriving resolve from the very proof it held. It wasn't documents alone. It was history, memory, and responsibility interwoven in paper and ink. And in that instant, everyone realized nothing within this courtroom would ever be the same again. The judge nodded slightly, indicating that the floor was hers. Robyn stood her shoulders back, met Kody's gaze head-on, and set out to recount the years-in-the-making story. Each word was calculated, each hesitation measured, meant not to accuse, but to uncover. The family had witnessed arguments, battles, and stretches of tension before, but not like this one. This was public, permanent, and unavoidable. Each gaze in the courtroom stayed on her. The hush was oppressive, punctuated only by the slight rustle of documents and the occasional breath. Each sentence spoken by Robyn had a gravitas that was nearly palpable, descending over the room like a thick fog. As the first day of her testimony came to a close, one thing was painfully obvious. The calm before the storm had passed. The Brown family's secrets, tensions, and betrayals were about to be exposed for all to witness. And the world, watching through cameras and hushed accounts, would never forget this moment, the moment Robyn Brown finally opened her mouth, and Kody Brown was forced to face the repercussions of a lifetime of decisions. Robyn breathed deeply, allowing the courtroom to drink in her essence. All eyes were on her now, and she sensed the pressure of their gaze pushing down upon her, like a physical force. The folder in her hand was not merely paper anymore. It was her armor, her sword, and her voice all combined. She opened it slowly, allowing the sheets to slide out with a soft rustle, a noise that sounded impossibly loud in the strained quiet of the room. I trusted him, she started, her voice shaking a little. I believed in him, and each day that trust was tested, broken, and dismissed. The words sliced the room like a blade. Kody's eyes went white, and for one moment he seemed smaller, almost vulnerable, as though Robyn's words had peeled away each and every mask he'd ever worn. His hands jerked spasmodically across the table, struggling to grasp composure oozing from his grasp. Robyn went on, her voice harder with each word. She talked of all-night fights that left her alone and desolate, of clandestine phone calls and hushed whispers she was not supposed to hear. Every detail, every accusation was presented with careful precision. No theatrics, no screaming, just cold hard facts. For all those years, I stood watching as choices were made that impacted not only me, but my children, our family, and the very core of what we owed one another. Robyn described, her voice shaking with tears she would not shed. And each time, I stood there alone, questioning if he ever really cared about what I required. The gallery leaned forward as a single unit, as if hanging on every word. Even Mary, Janelle, and Christine couldn't hide their reactions. Mary's jaw tightened, her hands clenching tightly on her lap. Janelle's brow furrowed, her lips pressing into a thin line as anger and sadness battled across her face. Christine's eyes narrowed, a flicker of shock and realization passing through them. Robyn was revealing truths they had all sensed but never dared confront openly. The judge's gaze was pinned on Robyn, watching intently as each word, each hesitation was noted. This was a case that no evidence could determine. It was a court filled with emotion, history, and profound personal interests. "I have the proof," Robyn replied, pointing to the folder. "Documents, texts, and evidence of decisions made that were not just bad but damaging. Decisions that ripped at the very seams of this family." Kody leaned forward in his chair, anxiety etched on his expression. His normally even measured tone was nowhere to be found, replaced by tension and fear. He prepared to answer, but Robyn's next statement broke through before he had a chance. "I am not here to blame," she stated, her voice trembling but firm. "I am here to tell the truth. Because for far too long, silence has shielded lies, and shielding of lies has destroyed all the people I love." The room grew quiet. Even the scratching of pens and the gentle sounds of cameras clicking ceased, as if the whole courthouse held its breath in anticipation of what she would say. Flashbacks danced across Robyn's mind, and for a second or two the courtroom disappeared. She recalled nights crying by herself, begging for truth, watching the family break down in front of her, and feeling powerless. But here where she stood, she felt strength. Strength in the truth, strength in her words, and strength in being heard. "You don't get it," Kody grumbled under his breath, barely audible, but enough so that Robyn overheard. His words didn't count. They couldn't erase what had been said or withdraw the years of suffering. Robyn's testimony was calculated, accurate, and poignant. She outlined how Kody's decisions usually came at the expense of his own desires, at the detriment of the family's health, leaving emotional wounds that would heal in years to come. Each anecdote, each tale, painted the picture of a man who had broken the trust invested in him, and of a woman who had silently endured it, until now. Her gaze never wavered from the judges, never once shifting from the center of the courtroom, her voice now firm and authoritative. "I am finished hiding. I am finished with pretending that silence will save us. The truth is important. The truth will finally be heard." Kody's hands trembled as he pushed them onto the table, his face white and drawn with tension. He'd received criticism before, sure, but never like this, never with what he'd done exposed for everyone, including the people he cared about, to see in raw, unvarnished detail. The crowd sensed it too. There was a palpable change in atmosphere. People bent forward, torn between shock and amazement at Robyn's bravery. This was not a drama for the courtroom. This was history in the making. Robyn's final statements for this section were calculated, resonating throughout the room, and casting a lasting quietude that could not so easily be shattered. "For far too long, I have lived with the burden of choices that were never my own to make and bear. Today I speak on my own behalf, on behalf of my children, and on behalf of the truth. Because truth is the only force that can mend what's been broken." She put her hands firmly on the folder, allowing the gravity of her words to hang over all of them. The courtroom was silent, nearly hushed. Kody looked down at the floor, unwilling to meet her eyes. The burden of responsibility weighed upon him, unshakable and unavoidable. Even in the audience, the women of his family seemed stunned, not by anger, not just by sadness, but by the sheer magnitude of what had just been unveiled. Mary's eyes glistened with tears, Janelle's fingers twitched nervously, and Christine's expression was unreadable, a mixture of disbelief and dawning understanding. This was not just testimony. It was a reckoning, and Robyn, holding fast, had become the focal point of it all. Her bravery to speak, to expose, and to confront Kody without blanching, set the stage for the drama, confessions, and chaos to come. The atmosphere was still heavy with tension when she descended from the platform, the folder clutched tightly in her hand like a badge of honor. The gallery, Kody, and even the judge could feel the change. The tempest had broken, and there was no going back. The courtroom was shaken by Robyn's testimony. Each sentence that had escaped her lips struck with the force of a thunderclap, reducing Kody to a visibly shaken state, and the family in awe. The room paused for an instant, as if it would crumble under the pressure of all those feelings. Betrayal, rage, fear, and heartbreak all blended into one crushing tension. As the judge sat back, ready to digest the words, a voice pierced the thick silence. It was Christine. Her eyes burned with a passion no one had witnessed in years. Slowly, deliberately, she stood up from her seat in the spectators' gallery. Each step seemed calculated, deliberate as if she had practiced this moment in her own mind thousands of times. "I can't be quiet anymore," she told him. Her voice calm but firm, ringing out across the courtroom like a demand. "There are things you all need to know. Things Kody tried to keep from us all." The room broke into whispers. Heads snapped around. The crowd gasped. Kody stood still, eyes open in horror. Christine's words had struck him like a lance. He never looked cornered, defenseless and cowering with fear of the repercussions before. The judge held up a hand for silence. But Christine persisted. "I have proof, texts, recordings and decisions that were made in secret. Decisions intended to dominate and control this family." Robyn, sitting in the witness stand, blinked once in shock, then smiled quietly. Slowly, a little quiet recognition that she was no longer alone. Christine stood shoulder to shoulder with her, seeking out the truth. The energy in the room shifted. What had been white-knuckle tension now became a full-blown maelstrom of revelation. Kody's hands fluttered with his papers, but they trembled uncontrollably. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Every secret he had carefully hidden now hung in the air, waiting for confirmation, for exposure. The family members in the gallery were leaning forward, eyes wide, faces pale. Mary's fingers clutched the edge of the pew, as if bracing for the impact. Janelle's jaw was tight, her breathing shallow, as she tried to process what was happening. "It's time the truth comes out," Christine declared, her own voice resolute and unyielding. She nodded toward Kody, and even the judge's typically expressionless face flashed with interest. "We all have the right to know what's been happening behind closed doors." Robyn caught Christine's eye, and briefly they shared a wordless look that meant everything. So many years of tension, heartache and distrust had accumulated. But here in this courtroom, here they were in a tentative, unlikely bond. Together they were no longer merely a family in crisis. They were forces calling for accountability. The whispers around the room increased. Reporters writing vehemently, cameras pushing in close, and audience members leaning forward, unable to tear their gaze away. All eyes were fixed on Kody, whose face now wore a mixture of horror, guilt, and incredulity. The veneer of control he had so long maintained was beginning to crack, and the man underneath, naked, exposed, and accountable for his actions, was visible. "I have waited too long to speak," Christine went on, holding up a folder with her own copy of secret files written in bold letters. "Kody's behavior has impacted all of us. His decisions, his deceptions, his manipulations. And today it ends." The courtroom grew silent again. But this time there was a difference. It wasn't anticipation. It was fear. The air pulsed, as if electricity itself was crackling along the individuals in the room. Kody swallowed hard, his throat constricting, and for the first time, he looked truly scared. Robyn, holding her folder tightly, took a deep breath. Her voice, though still tinged with emotion, was steady. "I've carried this pain for years. Today the truth will finally be revealed. Not just for me, but for every person who has been hurt by deception." The judge nodded slowly, recognizing the seriousness of the matter. He gestured for Christine to produce her evidence. As she opened her folder and spread out documents, photographs and texts, the room drew in, each detail amping up the drama. Kody's face went pale. He attempted to interrupt, to clarify, to defend himself, but Christine's calm, incisive delivery stunned him into silence. Every document was a blow, every revelation, a high beam on choices he could no longer conceal. Mary's eyes welled with tears, Janelle's lips pressed tightly, and even the gallery leaned forward in anticipation. The tension was unbearable, a living thing that wrapped around everyone in the room. This was more than a courtroom moment. It was a reckoning. Robyn stood, shaking a little but firm, as Christine spoke on. Together they were unveiling a web of deceit, manipulation and treachery. Kody's efforts to keep his cool dissolved under the constant pressure of facts. His breathing shallowed, his hands trembled, and his eyes searched the room frantically for an escape that wasn't available. "This is not about one individual," Christine stated bluntly, addressing the judge. "It's about the family. It's about responsibility. And it's time we face what has been hidden in secrecy for far too long."
The courtroom was completely entranced. Cameras went off, pens scribbled notes, and murmurs spread like wildfire. The shock, the tension, and the emotion raw hung in the air. Kody's secrets, long buried beneath a skillfully crafted facade, were now revealed for all to see. Robyn stood quietly, her eyes on Kody for one final moment. Her voice rang across the room, resolute and firm. The truth cannot be ignored any longer. And in that instant, the room collectively knew. This was not mere testimony. This was the genesis of a tempest. One that would do everything possible to alter the Brown family's life forever. The courtroom was charged, each corner of it buzzing with tension. Robyn's testimony had already shaken the room, and Christine's bombshell had landed like a ton of bricks. Now the focus rested on Kody Brown, whose well-maintained poise was disintegrating before all eyes. He clutched the side of the defendant's table so hard his knuckles blanched. Drops of sweat appeared at his hairline, and his normally assured stance now wavered, almost girlish in its vulnerability. The burden of the truth, heretofore shunned and concealed behind denials, now bore down on him with unyielding force. "I never intended to hurt anyone," he at last stammered, his voice cracking in a way that was betraying desperation. "You don't realize the choices I had to make, the sacrifices I believed I needed to make." But his words were empty. The room remained unmoved. Robyn's eyes, piercing and unflinching, pierced his soul, reading each secret thought, each moment of infidelity. Christine's look was no less stern, her face fixed in a resolute mask that brooked no deceit. The gallery shifted forward, the crowd holding its breath. Even the judge, a woman with a stern face, watched Kody with curiosity and skepticism. The burden of what he had done, the shattered trust, the clandestine decisions, the deception now pressed down upon him, unavoidable and incontestable. "I wanted to preserve the family," Kody went on, voice shaking. I believed I was doing the right thing." Robyn's head wagged from side to side slowly,
A combination of sorrow and determination crossing her face. The right thing? For whom, Kody? For yourself? Her voice, firm and biting, brooked no dodging. The courtroom seemed to shrink now, closer, as if each individual who was in it was crowding Kody, making him answer. Christine stepped forward, her hands resting lightly on the folder of evidence she had presented. "For too long, lies have protected you, but they've hurt all of us. The truth cannot be ignored any longer." Kody's eyes darted around the room. He searched for allies, for understanding, but there was none. Mary's expression was a mixture of disappointment and hurt. Janelle's gaze burned into him, a silent accusation that carried years of unresolved tension. Even the judge's eyes were stern, expectant, as if silently saying, "This is your moment to face what you've done." His voice cracked once more, a hoarse, nearly desperate tone. "I didn't know it would come to this. I just wanted the family to be okay." But no one trusted him, not anymore. The depositions had stripped away all the defenses, leaving Kody vulnerable to the harsh scrutiny of the courtroom. The papers, the texts, the proof, they were not mere pieces of paper, but irrefutable evidence of decisions that had broken up relationships, trust, and love. Robyn's tone softened a little, not with compassion, but with gentle power. "The family has endured enough. It's time for the truth to come out, and for healing to start." Kody's hands dropped to his lap. For the first time, the proud, unbreakable man that everybody knew was small, overpowered and alone. The room held its breath, except for his labored breathing. Each passing moment stretched into an eternity, the tension almost more than it could bear. Christine presented herself before the judge, with cool deliberation, presenting further evidence to the case. Each page, each photograph, each text message was another blow to Kody's faltering defense. The room seemed to be shrinking, the walls compressing in, the atmosphere heavy with tension and heartbreak. Kody attempted one final time to speak, his voice a reed-thin whisper. I didn't mean to." But Robyn interrupted him softly but firmly. "Intentions don't undo the pain, Kody. The truth does. And what matters here is the truth." The judge leaned forward,
his gavel poised slightly, underscoring the gravity of the proceedings. Everyone in the courtroom, family, audience, and press, could feel the weight of the moment. Kody was no longer the man who mastered his environment. He was now completely naked, called upon to face the ramifications of his decisions. As he bowed his head, one tear slipped free, following a path down his cheek. It was a tiny humanizing moment in the maelstrom of tension, but it also represented the incredible pressure he now endured. The accession of evidence, emotional evidence, and unyielding examination had pushed him to his limit. Robyn's consistent presence, Christine's unyielding valor, and the silent judgment from Meri and Janelle made it impossible for Kody to hide. The courtroom, the place that was once a room of possible negotiation and defense, was now a room of retribution, a platform where honesty was the dominant ruler and falsehood was helpless. The hearing concluded with a resounding gavel blow. Court adjourned until further proceedings. The judge intoned, his voice loaded with authority, but with a shadow of seriousness that left no one under any illusion. The tempest was hardly over yet. Kody sat, his hands shaking, his chest rising and falling, realizing that next time the courtroom doors swung open, there would be no recipe, no pardon, no evading the ramifications of the truth that had at last been let loose. Outside the courtroom, murmurs of shock and amazement spread fast. The family stood in silence, taking in the emotional torrent they had just experienced. Robyn clutched her folder tightly, sensing the first hints of relief, that maybe finally, her voice had been heard. On the inside, Kody remained still, the burden of each choice, each secret, and each shattered trust bearing down upon him. The man who appeared invincible was now clearly broken, confronting a reality that would forever change the Brown family. The gavel came down on the bench with a deafening crash, reverberating in the courtroom like a warning. Court is adjourned until further evidence is presented, the judge stated, his tone light but weighted with authority. The words were plain, but the weight they carried made the room hum with tension. Kody sat, slumped shoulders, tightly folded hands resting on his lap. For the first time, the man who had dominated the story for so long was at a loss. The courtroom air still pulsed with the raw emotion of truth, betrayal, and broken trust. Every hushed word, every exchanged look, bore the echoes of the tempest that had just passed. Robyn left the witness stand, clutching her folder as a shield, emblem of the strength she had found to confront the man who had damaged her and their family. She walked slowly, methodically, her gaze sweeping across the courtroom, resting for a moment on Meri, Janelle, and Christine. Each of the women's faces told a story: relief, disappointment, sorrow, and determination. And Robyn sensed the silent reassurance of knowing she was not alone in demanding justice. Kody's eyes were still fixed on the ground, finding it impossible to look into Robyn's. The burden of the testimonies, the revelation of secrets, and Christine's condemning revelations had destroyed him, leaving him bare of defenses, and starkly conscious of the repercussions that faced him. The evidence folder, once a silent observer of decades of secrets, now felt like an ace of its own, forcing responsibility onto his very breast. The crowd started to buzz, trying to make sense of what they had just seen. Reporters took note of each detail, cameras caught each charged stare, and spectators hushed about the astonishing testimony. Social media would shortly light up with debate, speculation, and commentary regarding the in-court drama that transpired, but nothing could get across the emotional fire that the family experienced firsthand. In the corridors outside, journalists rushed for interviews, but in the courtroom, there was only silence. The family moved slowly, every step weighed down by what had happened. Robyn carried her head high, resolute but weary, while Kody followed behind, doubts and shadows of guilt obscuring each action. Meri, Janelle, and Christine conversed in hushed tones, each woman non-verbally understanding that things would never be the same anymore. The tension did not fade when the gavel dropped. It had actually just begun to ripple out. Robyn's voice, however soft now, had forever left its stamp. Christine's bravery had dispelled the myth of control that Kody had worked so hard to project for so many years. In the courtroom, once a chamber of ritual and process, had become a stage of accounting, justice, and unadorned human emotion.
Kody remained still, the weight of his actions finally registering. He felt the family's eyes, the judge's eyes, the audience's eyes all on him. And with each look, knew that no rationale, no justification, could unmake what had been done. Each choice he had made, each lie he had told, was out in the open, and the repercussions, though not yet complete, shadowed him like a brewing storm. Robyn looked back for a final time. As she exited the courtroom, her face was a blend of determination and sadness, an unspoken warning to Kody. The truth had been told, and it would never be silenced again. The folder in her hand, now filled with the weight of responsibility, was almost symbolic. A gesture that while pain and deceit had forged the past, courage and truth could forge the future. As the courtroom cleared out, the tension clung to it like a storm cloud. With each step Kody took, it seemed heavier than the previous one, each one reminding him of the revelations he had gone through, and the judgment he was facing. The crowd outside murmured to each other, talking about the next chapters, the secrets that were yet to be revealed, and the destiny of the Brown family. The last few seconds of the day were seared into all their memories. Robyn's bravery, Christine's blunt truthfulness, and Kody's meltdown had set a tale that would not be forgotten. Although the courtroom was adjourned, the emotional tempest was far from abated. The screen of reality seemed to dissolve into anticipation, leaving one question suspended in the air like a thunderclap. What happens when the doors of the courtroom open again? For the Browns, the answers were unknown. For the viewers, the tension was agonizing. One thing was certain. The truth had been told, but the aftermath, the confrontations, and the final repercussions awaited. And as soon to be revealed to viewers, the tale was far from finished.